Hello, I'm here once again covering the stats released recently for Siege, except this time I will be covering the Defender statistics. As mentioned in the Attacker Stats vid, the details that are used and subsequently released to us to look at are the operator pick rates, as in how often operators are being used, and the operator win rate deltas, which, simplified, is how well an operator performs. As always, the article and graph referred to in the video is available in the description for your own perusal, and if you want to see my attacker operator stats analysis, then that will be the previous video released on this channel, so feel free to go check that out if interested. With all that said, let's get into the actual graph and what really sticks out as anomalies. So you can see how a lot of the defenders are gathering up just above and left to the center of the graph, showing how they're relatively successful operators picked semi-often, but not as often as some of the others. Okay, great. But then, lording it above them all is Rook, with a win delta of 3%, which is quite a bit more than the next nearest, which is Caveira and Doc, both respectively on win deltas of 1.6. From this, it is clear that Rook is a very successful operator when picked, despite his actual pick rate being super average. His average pick rate can easily be explained, I feel, as his gadget is super basic. He's often picked in videos as the perfect beginner operator in Siege for this very reason. You load into the round, place your armor for everyone to get, and you've already contributed quite a lot to the team. This simplicity, however, could be a reason not to pick him, as people might see him as either boring or not providing enough utility to their defense, despite the stats, as seen here, showing his honestly pretty insane win delta. I guess if you want to win defense, just pick Rook, right? Right? Well, maybe not. Moving on from Rook and his ridiculous performance, we'll take a nosedive to inspect three operators who have an opposite issue of being evidently underpowered and underpicked, or at least that's what the stats would tell you. I'm talking of course about Castle, Clash and Tachanka, as you can see. Now, to get this out of the way quickly, I know Tachanka sucks, you know Tachanka sucks, he will be reworked at some point, so let's just ignore him and focus on the other two underperformers. Castle has been in a weird place in Siege, where he performs excellently within Pro League or full 5-stack teams, but almost everywhere else he really struggles to not be either a hindrance to his team or effectively use his gadget. It's easy to see why this might be the case. In a coordinating team who are selecting specific strats to execute based on the site they want to defend, castle barricades can be pre-planned and simply executed. The team all know where they will be in these circumstances, and they know to work around them. In a ranked or casual game, likely filled with random players who may or may not have mics and may or may not be communicating, the team can easily be confused and or irritated by what the castle might be trying to do. It's not, in my opinion, the gadget underperforming in these cases. It's more the communication not being there to support whatever setup the castle might be aiming for. This can leave roamers being blocked off from moving around the map smoothly, as they weren't necessarily told where the castle barricades were going to be placed, and this can sometimes cause friction within the team and cause players to underperform. Even at the higher ranks, it seems, where of course the stats for these graphs are being pulled from, Castle seems to be a hard pick to make work. His win delta seems to be negative 3%, and this likely has resulted in people not wanting to pick him over other, easier defensive operators, leaving his pick rate at a measly 10%. Now, I could see Castle receiving a future buff to his gadget, in order to address this long-term problem. I read somewhere on the Rainbow Six Siege subreddit about a possible fix to his gadget in non-competitive play. It would be some kind of thumb scanner or retina scanner, something attached to the castle barricades that friendlies could use to silently open a barricade for them to get past without making the noise of breaking them manually, as you currently do. This would of course help less coordinated ranked teams, as roamers would be able to get past the castle barricades with much less difficulty, and of course without making the noise. This would help the castle, as he wouldn't need to go to a broken castle barricade location to replace it. But this is just one possible fix, of course, to him as an operator outside of the, competitive play in Siege, so maybe there are other avenues that could be explored in future. Whatever fix they end up going for, I do expect Ubisoft to buff him in some way in the future at some point. Onto Clash, she has an even worse pick rate and win delta than Castle, with the win delta being negative 10.9%, and her pick rate being around 1 or 2%. To put this into perspective, this is a worse performance than Tachanka, who sits at a win delta of negative 3%. This is abysmal, and honestly, I find it hard to come up with reasons for it, but I will do my best. I assume that part of the reason behind her extremely low performance is the player base being so unfamiliar with how to use her. She was only added in Operation Grim Sky, of course, which was not really all that long ago. Couple that with her extremely low pick rate, and clearly people aren't opting to use her and experiment with her as much as perhaps they could, or should. So some of the poor stats could be down to this unfamiliarity within the Siege player base. Now, I know that some teams in Pro League have used her as some kind of a trump card in end-of-round scenarios. This is because, in theory, her shield allows her to avoid damage in a 1v1 engagement if she doesn't get flanked, and the shield's taser damage allows her to deal damage with impunity in such a 1v1 scenario. So the theory is that if the rest of the defender team trades out evenly, leaving Clash facing a single attacker at the end of the round, the attacker will really struggle to deal with her or get the diffuser down. However, maybe this requires more coordination than even the standard high-ranked team possesses, an issue similar to Castle's, one might say. Or perhaps the theory behind her usage is simply flawed. Maybe it's too unreliable in expecting your teammates to trade out at the least evenly. Or perhaps it's just too easy to kill her 1v1. I'm really not sure, and if you have any idea as to why she's underperforming so unbelievably heavily, feel free to leave a comment below. Moving on from the underperforming defenders, let's scrutinize the overpicked defenders. Whilst there are a few on show here, as you can see clearly, I'm going to be focusing on the two most picked, who are Doc and Jaeger. Doc has a pick rate of 53%, and Jaeger has a pick rate of 61%. Why are these two operators leading the pack and proving so popular? I believe that the reason for this might be similar to why the most picked attacking operators are the most picked, as seen in the previous video, where, in my opinion, they were highly picked because they were flexible and had great gear, in essence being the complete operator package. The same can easily be said for Doc and Jaeger. Starting with their gadgets, Doc has his stim pistol that can heal, overheal, and revive people at range, and Jaeger of course has his ADS, which can protect key locations on the map from grenades and some other utility items. Both of these gadgets are powerful on almost any site. Sure, Jaeger can be better on, generally, upstairs sites, as people like to flash through windows and use that time to safely enter, which Jaeger directly counters, if not countered himself, through a Twitch or similar anti-gadget operator. But broadly speaking, his ADSs are always a welcome addition to a defensive setup. Doc's stim pistol is completely disconnected in power from the defensive site chosen, as, regardless of site, there will always be injured teammates in need of a heal or people needing reviving. So, from this, we can establish that both of their gadgets are incredibly flexible and unreliant on what site you pick. Moving on to their other gear, both Doc and Jaeger have great primary weapons, with Doc having the ACOG carrying MP5 that allows him to hold longer defensive angles and positions, and Jaeger, whilst wishing he still had his ACOG of course, still has his very solid 416C carbine. Other than this, they both have available barbed wire, which is always nice to have, and Jaeger can bring, instead of the barbed wire, a deployable shield, which is, I would say, largely unused due to barbed wire being just so useful at slowing pushes down, but sometimes can find niche scenario uses, and Doc has a bulletproof camera as his alternative, which on certain sites can be very powerful indeed, especially against smoke grenades as it can see through the smoke, potentially directly countering a glass or cheeky smoked diffuser plant attempt. In short, they both have super flexible gadgets, great guns, and solid secondary gadgets available. Having either of these on your team is almost always, in good hands of course, a boon. I think we can safely say why they are picked as often as they clearly are. And there we have it. That's my quick analysis of the anomalies that stood out for the Defender operators in Siege for Year 3 high-ranked play. I do hope this was interesting, and I'll see you in the next one.